Think Hollywood gets history right? Think again. While most period pieces sacrifice facts for drama faster than Marie Antoinette lost her head, a rare few actually do their homework. From Georgian courtrooms to wartime trenches, these 15 shows and films didn't just nail the costumes, they captured the soul of their eras. Ready for history that doesn't lie? Wolf Hall, The Mirror and the Light, 2025. The long-awaited conclusion to Hilary Mantel's Tudor saga finally hit screens this year, and holy smokes, was it worth the wait. Mark Rylance returns as Thomas Cromwell, the blacksmith's son who rose to become Henry VIII's most trusted advisor, only to face the same executioner's blade he arranged for so many others. The attention to detail here is absolutely staggering. Director Peter Kosminski insisted on shooting only by candlelight for interior scenes, creating that authentic 16th century dimness that makes you feel like you're actually creeping through Hampton Court's corridors. The costume department analyzed actual Tudor paintings down to the thread count, and every piece of dialogue comes straight from historical documents or Mantel's meticulously researched prose. Critics have been unanimous in their praise, with The Guardian calling it the most terrifyingly accurate portrayal of Tudor politics ever filmed. What makes this final chapter so compelling isn't just the inevitable downfall, but how it captures the paranoia of Henry's court, where yesterday's favorite could be tomorrow's headless corpse. When Cromwell finally meets his end, there's no dramatic music or Hollywood theatrics, just the clinical efficiency of Tudor justice, exactly as historical records describe it. If you want to understand how power actually worked in Henry's England, this is as close as you'll ever get without a time machine. The Terror, 2018. In 1845, 2 British ships vanished while searching for the Northwest Passage. Their crews, 129 men total, completely disappeared. When their remains were finally found, evidence suggested something truly horrifying: cannibalism. AMC's first season of The Terror takes this real expedition and transforms it into one of the most meticulously researched horror stories ever filmed. What's unbelievable about this show is how much historical documentation they incorporated. The production team consulted actual crew lists, ship logs, and even autopsy reports from bodies discovered in the permafrost. Every detail from the ship's layouts to the tinned food that gave the crew lead poisoning is historically verified. They even recreated the exact contents of the sailors' sea chests based on manifests. While the show adds a supernatural element, everything else about life aboard Arctic expedition ships is painfully accurate. The New York Times praised it as historical horror that refuses to romanticize 19th century British imperialism. The scenes of sailors dragging lifeboats across the ice match exactly with Inuit, testimony about the expedition's final days. What's most impressive is how The Terror captures the psychological reality of 19th century sailors faced with unimaginable conditions: the rigid hierarchy, the misplaced confidence in technology, and the slow descent into madness when both fail. If you want to understand how exploration actually felt before GPS and rescue helicopters, this frozen nightmare is as real as it gets. House of David, 2025. Amazon's biblical epic about King David burst onto screens earlier this year, becoming their most-watched historical drama ever, with over 22 million viewers in its first 17 days. The series follows David's rise from shepherd boy to giant slayer to conflicted king, all set against the brutal backdrop of ancient Israel. What separates House of David from previous biblical adaptations is its unflinching archaeological accuracy. The production team worked with experts from Tel Aviv University to recreate 10th century BCE architecture, weapons, and daily life. Every prop, from cooking utensils to musical instruments, was vetted by archaeologists. Michael Fassbender's David doesn't wear the Hollywood standard leather armor, but rather the historically accurate linen garments reinforced with bronze scales that archaeological digs have uncovered. The Washington Post called it a biblical drama that treats history with the same reverence as scripture, while religious scholars have praised its portrayal of ancient Israelite religious practices. Rather than sanitizing David's story, the show embraces his complexities, from military genius to troubled father. The battle scenes avoid flashy choreography in favor of the chaotic, primitive warfare of the era, with Bronze Age tactics that military historians have verified as accurate. When David finally takes Jerusalem, the siege techniques shown are exactly those used in the ancient Near East, making this not just great drama, but a legitimate window into a world 3,000 years gone. 12 Years a Slave, 2013. Most slavery films romanticize, sanitize, or simplify. Steve McQueen's adaptation of Solomon Northup's 1853 memoir does none of these things. The result? Possibly the most brutally honest depiction of American slavery ever committed to film. What's revolutionary about 12 Years a Slave is how it dismantles every Hollywood cliché about antebellum America. The plantations aren't beautiful mansions, but working farms built on pain. The slave owners aren't all cartoonish villains, but people who've normalized horror into everyday business. Historical consultant Henry Louis Gates Jr. worked extensively with the production to ensure every detail, from the cotton-picking techniques to the slave auction procedures, matched primary sources. The film was so accurate that it's now used in university history courses. The New Yorker called it the first time in cinema that we've seen slavery as it actually was. Most impressive is how the film captures the economic realities of the slave system, showing how financial pressures and bank loans drove treatment of human property. When Benedict Cumberbatch's character reluctantly sells Northup to a crueler master to pay debts, we see the banal business decisions behind historical atrocities. The whipping scene, filmed in a single unbroken take, reproduces the exact punishment described in Northup's book, with neither embellishment nor mercy. If you want to understand America's original sin without Hollywood filters, this film stands alone. John Adams, 2008. HBO's 7-part miniseries about America's most underrated founding father changed the game for historical television. Paul Giamatti's portrayal of the brilliant, irritable Adams tracks his journey from Boston lawyer to revolutionary to president with unmatched historical precision. The production team was absolutely obsessive about accuracy, consulting over 80 primary sources to get everything right. They recreated Adams' actual home in Quincy, based on architectural drawings, and even planted the same vegetables in the garden that Adams documented in his letters. The smallpox inoculation scene shows the exact procedure used in the 1770s, including the crude instruments and recovery process. Even the wigs were made with period-accurate techniques and materials. The Wall Street Journal called it the most accurate founding father portrayal ever filmed, while historians praised how it shows both the brilliance and flaws of the revolutionary generation. What's most remarkable is how the series captures the ideological debates of the time without simplifying them for modern audiences. The constitutional arguments between Adams and Jefferson feel like eavesdropping on actual 18th century conversations, preserving their complexity and contradictions. When Adams defends British soldiers after the Boston Massacre, we see exactly how precarious revolutionary principles were when tested against mob mentality. This isn't just great television. It's a masterclass in early American history that even professional historians admire. Oppenheimer, 2023. Christopher Nolan's 3-hour epic about the father of the atomic bomb wasn't just a box office phenomenon, it was a masterclass in historical accuracy. While most films about scientists take wild liberties, Nolan's adaptation of American Prometheus sticks religiously to documented facts while still delivering edge-of-your-seat drama. The attention to detail is mind-blowing. The recreation of the Trinity test site used the exact same measurements and materials as the original. The equations on the blackboards aren't gibberish, but actual physics formulas that Oppenheimer and his team developed. Cillian Murphy spent months learning Oppenheimer's speech patterns and mannerisms from archival footage, down to his specific way of holding a cigarette. Even the security badges worn at Los Alamos match original designs. Physics World magazine called it possibly the most accurate portrayal of theoretical physics ever put on screen, while historians praised its honest portrayal of the Manhattan Project's ethical compromises. What's most impressive is how the film captures the scientific process without Hollywood's simplification. When Oppenheimer and his team debate quantum mechanics or nuclear chain reactions, they're having historically accurate conversations based on meeting notes and memoirs. The security hearings that ended Oppenheimer's government career use actual transcript dialogue, preserving the political complexity without reducing it to good versus evil. This isn't just Nolan's best film, it's probably the most accurate scientist biopic ever made. Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, 2003. Peter Weir's naval epic wasn't just overlooked at the Oscars, it was overlooked by audiences who didn't realize they were watching the most accurate portrayal of Napoleonic-era naval life ever filmed. Based on Patrick O'Brien's meticulously researched novels, this is the rare historical film where literally everything on screen is correct. The production team's commitment to authenticity was legendary. They built a full-scale replica of a British frigate based on Admiralty records from 1805. The sailors' movements during battle stations were choreographed using actual Royal Navy drill manuals. Even the food served in the officers' mess was prepared using period recipes, with the actors eating actual salted pork and ship's biscuit during filming. The medical procedures shown, including a brutal brain surgery, follow naval surgeons' logs exactly. Naval historians have universally praised the film, with one calling it as close as we'll ever get to time travel to a Napoleonic warship. What's most impressive is how the film captures the social ecosystem of a warship without modern sensibilities. The harsh discipline, strict class divisions, and superstitions of early 19th century sailors are presented without judgment or modern filtering. When Russell Crowe's Captain Aubrey orders a flogging, we see both the tactical necessity and moral cost of leadership decisions that modern viewers find barbaric, but period sailors would have expected. This isn't just a great adventure film, it's probably the most thoroughly researched historical movie ever made. Deadwood, 2004 to 2006. HBO's profanity-laden Western might seem like a stylized take on the frontier, but beneath all those creative curses lies perhaps the most accurate portrayal of frontier life ever filmed. Creator David Milch worked with historians to ensure that while the language was heightened, everything else about 1870s Dakota Territory was brutally real. The historical detail is extraordinary. The muddy streets and ramshackle buildings of the camp were based on actual photographs and surveyors' maps of early Deadwood. The gold mining techniques shown match contemporary accounts exactly. Even the camp's evolution from lawless outpost to organized town follows the actual municipal records. Most impressively, almost every major character was a real person whose basic story arc matches historical fact, from Al Swearengen's brothel operation to Seth Bullock's transition from hardware merchant to sheriff. The Smithsonian Magazine called it the most historically accurate Western ever produced, F-bombs notwithstanding. What's most remarkable is how the show captures the economic and political realities that traditional Westerns ignore. When the camp residents form an ad hoc government to handle a smallpox outbreak using the exact same procedures documented in frontier communities, we're seeing the messy reality of how American civil society actually formed, not the romanticized version. The show's portrayal of frontier capitalism, with its mixture of opportunity and exploitation, corruption and community, gives us a more honest picture of Western development than 100 John Wayne films. Chernobyl, 2019. HBO's 5-part miniseries about the 1986 nuclear disaster didn't just win Emmys, it became required viewing in nuclear safety courses. Creator Craig Mazin spent years researching the disaster, consulting with former Soviet scientists, nuclear experts, and survivors to create what might be the most thoroughly documented historical drama ever made. The production's commitment to accuracy borders on obsessive. They rebuilt the Chernobyl control room based on photographs and blueprints, with every dial and switch in the exact position as on the fateful night. The radiation effects shown on victims' bodies were based on medical photographs and reports. Even the Soviet uniforms were sourced from Ukrainian military surplus to ensure period accuracy. When the scientists explain the nuclear physics, they're using the actual technical explanations from investigation reports. Nuclear physicists have praised the show's scientific accuracy, with one calling it the best portrayal of a nuclear accident ever filmed. What's most impressive is how the series captures the Soviet system's structural problems without resorting to Cold War stereotypes. When bureaucrats refuse to acknowledge the disaster's magnitude, we're seeing the actual documented responses based on meeting minutes and memoirs. The show even portrays the heroism of Soviet workers and scientists accurately, avoiding both Western superiority and Soviet propaganda narratives. When workers wade into radioactive water to prevent a larger catastrophe, we're watching a recreation of actual events that unfolded exactly as shown. This isn't just great television. It's probably the most important historical document about Chernobyl accessible to general audiences. Gladiator II, 2024. Ridley Scott's long-awaited sequel to his 2000 epic shocked audiences, not just with its brutal action, but with its startling historical accuracy. While the original took significant liberties with Roman history, the sequel hired a team of classical historians to ensure every detail of Emperor Caracalla's Rome was correct, resulting in the most accurate portrayal of 3rd century Rome ever filmed. The attention to detail is incredible. The Colosseum scenes show the actual documented special events held there, including the famous naval battles created by flooding the arena. The gladiator training methods match archaeological evidence from discovered training facilities. Even the political machinations reflect the actual crisis the Roman Empire faced during this period, with military commanders gaining unprecedented power while the Senate weakened, exactly as historical sources describe. Classical scholars have widely praised the film, with one calling it a legitimate teaching tool for understanding Rome's imperial decline. What's most impressive is how the film captures the religious and cultural diversity of late imperial Rome without modern filters. When Paul Mescal's character encounters Eastern mystery cults and African religious practices within Roman society, we're seeing the documented multicultural reality of an empire spanning 3 continents. The film's portrayal of the economic strains that eventually collapsed Rome, from currency debasement to military overspending, gives audiences more insight into actual Roman history than most documentaries. For all its spectacular action, this sequel stands as perhaps the most historically valid mainstream film about ancient Rome ever made. The Trial of the Chicago 7, 2020. Aaron Sorkin's courtroom drama about the aftermath of the 1968 Democratic Convention protests didn't just win critical acclaim, it set a new standard for accuracy in portraying recent American history. Sorkin based the script almost entirely on court transcripts, interviews, and FBI files, many of which were only declassified in the 2010s. The historical detail is remarkable. The recreated courtroom matches photographs down to the wood paneling patterns and light fixtures. The protesters' clothing and appearance were based on news footage and arrest photographs. Even the timeline of events inside and outside the courtroom follows documented accounts precisely. Most impressively, much of the dialogue, particularly Judge Hoffman's controversial rulings, comes verbatim from court transcripts. Legal scholars have praised the film's procedural accuracy, with one calling it the most precise portrayal of a political trial in American cinema. What's most impressive is how the film captures the era's political divisions without reducing either side to caricatures. When Eddie Redmayne's Tom Hayden and Sacha Baron Cohen's Abby Hoffman argue about protest tactics, they're having historically documented debates that actually occurred within the movement. The film's portrayal of how the justice system can be weaponized for political purposes, based entirely on verified historical events, offers viewers a more sophisticated understanding of constitutional principles than any civics lesson. This isn't just compelling drama, it's an essential historical document about a pivotal moment in American legal history. Dear Hong, 2024. This Korean historical drama set during the late Joseon era would have been easy to overlook amid flashier streaming options, but historians and critics agree. It might be the most meticulously researched period drama ever made. Following the mysterious return of a merchant family's heir during a time of social transformation, it captures the complexity of pre-modern Korean society with unprecedented accuracy. The production team's commitment to historical detail is staggering. They recreated 19th century Hanseong based on maps and paintings from the era. The Confucian customs shown, from ancestral rites to mourning practices, follow historical documents exactly. Even the criminal investigation methods match actual Joseon-era police manuals. Most impressively, the dialogue uses historically accurate speech patterns and vocabulary for different social classes, with scholars verifying every line. The Korea Times called it a historical achievement that sets a new standard for period accuracy, while international critics praised its portrayal of a non-Western historical setting without Orientalist cliches. What's most remarkable is how the show captures the social reality of late Joseon Korea without simplification. When characters navigate the complex world of merchant guilds, government corruption, and social reform movements, we're seeing historically documented systems that shaped Korean modernity. The show's treatment of child trafficking reflects actual historical problems rarely discussed in either Korean or Western media. For viewers seeking a genuinely educational historical drama that never sacrifices entertainment value, Dear Hong stands alone at the summit of accuracy. So, which of these historical time machines will you be boarding first? From Tudor politics to Korean merchants, these shows and films prove you don't need to sacrifice facts for drama. But here's the real question. Does absolute historical accuracy always make for better storytelling? Or do some periods need a little creative license to connect with modern audiences? Hit us up in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the best in historical entertainment.